Good morning and welcome to our Building Resilience in Teachers webinar. I'm your host, Stephanie Dahan, and I'm the Events and Content Manager for SACAP. So most kids and adolescents between the age of 5 and 17 find it very hard to see their teachers outside of school. It doesn't make sense and it's really difficult to resolve that teachers are people with normal needs like the rest of us too. So without any further ado, Dr. Laila will be taking us through bullying in the workplace. Janine and Alicia will be speaking into self-care and self-love. And lastly, Dr. Lauren will be speaking into resilient teachers and empowering students as to how teachers themselves can enjoy self-care and be resilient in their profession. Dr. Laila, now over to you.
Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity to be with you on a Saturday morning and to delve into a topic that is really important. So before we begin, I'm going to ask you your permission to just, wherever you are, in whatever space you are, to just take a deep breath in and arrive wherever you're coming from. It's just the morning run, coffee, breakfast, and just arrive on your seats. I'm going to invite you on a little bit of imagery. So as you take that wonderful inhale and that much needed exhale, the invitation for you is to imagine entering a work environment, the hum of productivity filling the air, or perhaps a place where young minds are nurtured and the future takes shape. But beneath the surface, in the shadowed corners of staff rooms or cubicles, break rooms, there's an actual story, a different story unfolds. It's a story of power imbalances, whispered insults, and the silent suffering of employees. Today, we embark on a journey through the intricate labyrinth of workplace bullying, guided not just by facts, but by narratives of those who've endured it. Just as a psychologist listens to the deepest echoes of the human mind, we'll delve into psychological intricacies of this issue, seeking not only to understand, but also change this narrative of bullying in the workplace. So welcome, I'm Dr. Laila Jeebodh-Desai, and welcome to this exploration of bullying in the workplace, a story that needs to be told and a problem that we are determined to solve. Let's begin. Thank you so much. So often we are in areas in workspaces that we often interact with different people. And the one thing that keeps us human is our human connection, the ability to connect to other beings, to see each other on a daily basis. What is quite significant is that your workspace and the time spent at work is usually between 8 to 10 hours. Sometimes for us, some of us, it's actually a little bit more. And it's during these times that we interact with people who we actually find sometimes to be extended family members because we're spending so much time with them. But it's not always pleasant. And sometimes we find ourselves susceptible to being targets, or could we say in a very intricate web of what we'd like to call quite outright workplace bullying. What we see is that to maximum workplace health and well-being, it's critical to create workplaces where all employees, regardless of the position of either being management or being middle management or being our staff or ground staff, everyone, regardless of their position, can feel safe. Systemic organizational level approaches can help prevent harm associated with different types of bullying. And we're going to jump right into this to talk about exactly what kinds or what is the definition of bullying, what examples of bullying can be experienced in the workplace, okay? We're also going to look at quite deeply the reasons or the psychological possibilities of why bullying occurs in the workplace. Because by understanding what brought a person there, only then can we actually strategize in moving forward to heal, to recover, and to prevent the narrative from repeating itself. So the psychological, or could we say psychological reasons, possibilities for bullying or in the workplace. But I want to say just off the mark right here, there's no justification for it. So whatever we explore right now in this seminar, we're going to be looking for reasons and not justifications. So that's just a little note to just put that clear. There's no justification for bullying. However, understanding this harmful behavior may help victims cope with it more effectively. It has much to do with the bully's own challenges of what they are experiencing or what they have experienced, okay? And social skills and anything they might have done to cause it. So in no means, when we explore the different reasons and the categories of bullying, are we making excuses for it or justifying this act. What you will be seeing are possible psychological reasons of why bullying in the workplace occurs. All right, before we begin, let's talk about what defines bullying. Bullying is defined as unwanted behavior from a person or group that is either offensive, intimidating, malicious, or insulting. It's an abuse or misuse of power that undermines, humiliates, or causes physical or emotional harm to someone. But remember, all of us at some stage or the other may interact with an individual that may say something once off. Now, I'd like to be very clear here. Bullying is also a very repetitive act. So we have to be very careful in using this label of bullying. Bullying is not someone having a bad day and then just yelling at you or being offensive at that moment, okay? Or insulting you at a moment where there's an argument going on. It is a repetitive practice. So like we said in the definition here, it's an abuse or misuse of power. It repeatedly undermines, humiliates, or causes physical or emotional harm to someone. Just as we've seen adolescents or younger children, or even university students experience some kind of bullying. This kind of behavior and repetitive understanding or misunderstanding of power repeats itself and continues to permeate throughout adulthood. So moving on, let's look now at how we often experience or what might bullying cause. So what might bullying actually look like? So examples of bullying in the workplace can include constant criticism of someone's work. Now, remember, when I say constant criticism, I'm not defining something as in such of someone giving you constructive criticism. There's two kinds of criticism that we can experience. Constructive criticism comes from work that actually has a solution when someone actually meets with you and actually comments on a specific work that you have possibly done and provides you with possibilities to improve your work. That is constructive criticism. The criticism I'm referring to here is a kind of criticism that is destructive and humiliating. So bullying might be a regular pattern of behavior or a once-off incident, as we said. It may happen face-to-face, on social media, on emails, or in calls. And that happens quite interestingly. I love the example of the face-to-face, where we often see it happening in terms of joking, or someone makes a joke or takes a little stab at you at work. And even though it's funny to the audience and the person actually initiating that kind of comment, if one person does not feel good about it, it's not acceptable. For example, if you are the subject of a face-to-face incident where someone is actually being quite insulting to you, but making it as a joke, it is not acceptable. And it's not funny if you don't find it funny either. Bullying can happen at work or in other work-related situations. So for example, bullying can happen in the workspace of a school. Bullying can happen also in the space of sports environments as well. And we see this becoming more and more increasingly difficult and reported. What's quite interesting is that it's not often called out. And it's not often called out by people experiencing it because we often doubt ourselves. Is this bullying? Is this person having a bad day? We excuse the behavior. But when it is repeated, it is unacceptable. So bullying may not always be obvious or noticed by others, especially those who are joining in the fun, especially those who are laughing at the same time as everyone is laughing. At the same time, the bully is actually perhaps degrading you. And sometimes people may not notice because you may be smiling and laughing along, so that you don't create a spectacle and that you don't become the subject of scrutiny. So therefore, it may not be noticed by others. It may be seen as just a joke. But if it is not funny to you and it degrades you as a human being, then we need to actually call it out. It's possible that someone might know or might not know that their behavior is bullying. However, it can still be bullying if they do not realize it or do not intend to bully someone else. So often when approaching a person who has been accused of bullying, they didn't know, or the comment would be, I didn't know you felt that way. Why didn't you say anything? Very often, a bully may not know that they are causing or creating such turmoil. However, in instances that we're going to see in different various psychological reasons, this might not be so easily excusable. Okay, so examples of bullying at work. Like we said, constantly criticizing someone's work. As I mentioned, the criticism is not constructive. This is destructive criticism. Spreading malicious rumors about someone. This is quite a popular one as well, as reported by various teachers and various employees that I've engaged with who have actually dealt with such a challenge, that the spreading of malicious rumors, that she said this, did you hear this? And it just manifests into bigger and bigger and bigger rumors. Someone constantly putting someone down in meetings where, it starts off as a joke. Oh, she doesn't know what she means. Hello, she's not there, or he's not there, or they are not there. Deliberately giving someone a heavier workload than everyone else. Quite a popular one that was reported by quite a few sample members. Deliberately giving someone a heavier workload than anyone else is something that is very important, because often the person doing the work feels that, okay, this is my time to thrive. But when you feel it is unfair, it is time to call that out. Excluding someone from team or social events. Now, social isolation, we often teach to adolescents, is a definite form of bullying. But when someone in a workplace excludes you from teams or social events, that is also equal to social isolation. That is something that also needs to be challenged. Of why was I actually not invited? Oh, I forgot. But you do exist and you do matter. Putting humiliating, offensive, or threatening comments or photos on social media. Now, although it is not as popular as the social media bullying in adolescence, we often find this kind of social media bullying in WhatsApp group messages, where someone is able to put a funny meme on somebody else in a group setting and everybody laughs about it. And perhaps the person just puts a thumbs up or whatever it is, but it continues. And I find ourselves, especially in the educational fraternity, to feel that if we are actually generating this message to the youth of today, that actually putting a thumbs up or laughing or continuing this kind of demise or continuing to support somebody else's demise also makes you someone who collaborates in the bullying. So if you are listening to what I'm saying right now and you are not the subject of bullying or the victim of bullying, and is someone who actually noticed somebody else being bullied, the time to change that narrative is now. If you notice that a person is almost being, really taken the mickey out of on a WhatsApp group message, then there's something to do about it in terms of saying something quite nice about the person immediately. Or brave enough to actually putting a thumbs down. We need to stop this kind of spread. We need to stop this kind of, horrible behavior amongst colleagues, because each one of us has a specific function and purpose at work. And it's often when these dilemmas of workplace bullying occurs that shifts our understanding, that shifts our focus of our purpose. And it can make a wonderful purpose such as teaching derailed. We're going to now look at upward bullying. So initially and throughout the previous slides, we talked about bullying coming from perhaps we mentioned high authorities where you're getting criticism of your work, being left out of teams, events, perhaps arranged by managers. However, bullying can also occur in an upward pattern. It can also happen from the staff towards someone more senior, like towards managers or principals or HODs. It is called upward bullying or subordinate bullying. Now, examples of this can include showing continued disrespect. So I want you to imagine being bullied by a manager, but flipping it on its head, perhaps joking or criticizing your manager or the principal or someone of authority, such as the head of department as well. Refusing to complete tasks that have actually been given to you by saying, oh, I have so many things to do, I have responsibilities, it's just not going to make it, but you continuing to do so. Spreading rumors about the person in that managerial or an upward position, such as a principal as well, constantly undermining someone's authority. So this is almost speaking in staff rooms, in groups, or maybe in smaller groups, degrading a human being, undermining how powerful they can be, or actually speaking about how weak the person is. Doing things to make someone seem unskilled or unable to do their job properly. Now, this is quite popular. So doing things to make someone seem unskilled, being very, very, can we say, pleasant in front of your manager or principal and saying, I'll do this, don't worry, I'd like to help you do this. But behind their backs going, oh, I had to do this for them, they're really going to mess it up. This happens quite a lot where people often offer their help and support, but often starts degrading the person that they are actually helping. Now, all these attributes, once again, could happen in a repetitive behavior. This is not a once-off thing. So it's not just spreading rumors once off and now you're a bully of a manager. These are repeated events. So once again, if you find yourself in this position of actually being the bully, of actually being in a position where there is an upward bullying premise, it's time to check in with ourselves, to reflect, and to actually ask ourselves if this is the way we would like to be treated ourselves. Now, there are various causes. Like I said, we're going to look at psychological possibilities of the causes of bullying. Once again, in no way am I justifying the act of bullying, but we're looking at possible reasons that someone could actually arrive at such a point that they actually cause hurt to another human being. The causes that we're going to look at in detail are perceived threat, as you as the victim is a perceived threat, desire for power, revenge, cyberbullying and cowardice, and sadism. So let's delve into that right now. So perceived threat. In many cases, you are targeted because a bully perceives you as their immediate threat. Now, that may be because you are different from the bully. And when we say different, it could be that you are different academically. Perhaps you are more superiorly qualified, or perhaps you are uniquely qualified. And this could be actually identified and actually interpreted as being different. Or perhaps you are that unique staff member that actually stands out from everyone else. Now, this can be identified as an also possible threat. Bullies often pick on individuals who they view as a threat whenever there is a threat to their social dominance, ego, or self-esteem. Now, this tells us quite a bit here, that when a bully has always received the spotlight, has always received the credit, or could we say all the comments and the positive attributes, they may see you coming in and overshadowing them as a possible threat as well. In no way am I saying to please tone it down, but what we are understanding is that these are possible reasons why bullies perceive you as a threat. It is a deeper underlying challenge that a bully needs to delve into and to address. So whether or not someone can actually pose as some type of threat can differ from people to people. So a threat may not be the reasons that we've just discussed above, but the way someone perceives another person as a threat and the reasons do vary. Bullies may possibly be unconscious or in denial of feeling threatened by someone else. They may actually not realize or perhaps haven't accepted the fact that they actually see you as a threat. So this is the one possibility or the psychological reason behind bullying. Let's take a look at the next one. Desire for power. Many bullies believe that using aggressive behavior to knock down people is a much effective way to build themselves up. When we say knocking down people, I am actually referring to criticizing someone or mocking someone in public, on social media, whatever it is, almost knocking them down to actually feel a little bit more powerful. to feel humorous, to feel in charge. Now, this is common when students are targeted in school bullying or in various social circles involving peers. Okay, and often bullies feel threatened by individuals whom they target. So once again, that desire for power or to reestablish my power, to reestablish my position, because you've threatened to actually move me off that position, is one of the possibilities of all reasons for bullying. Let's look at the next one. Revenge. Now, this is a far less common reason for bullying, but one possibility of the motivation for bullying is revenge. Now, research indicates that there are certain times when bullies genuinely believe that you as a victim have wronged them, have done something wrong to them, or someone that they care about at one point or another. And their bullying justifies what you have done to them or a loved one in the past. Once again, according to research, this is the least commonly discussed motivation. We say the more lesser of. The idea of this is in revenge. This is for the purpose of revenge. Now remember, once again, a bully may be aware of this. You may be aware of this as well, but also if it's repetitive and if it is causing hurt or harm to you, it needs to be reported too. Looking at the next reason. Cyberbullying and cowardice. This is often quite a common area that we're facing with children and specifically with adults too. It's often easier to attack someone when they are not your immediate presence, and many cyberbullies get feelings of pleasure when they click that like button, or pay attention to their attacks on others. We see this on social media so often, and often we fall victim to it too. For example, when we're looking at celebrities or something is being said in, quite a demoralizing thing about a celebrity. One of a very light example I can use is Amy Schumacher against Nicole Kidman. And it was such a light comment that she made. But it was quite interesting how many fans of Nicole Kidman actually addressed this as cyberbullying. And it was quite interesting to actually look at this and look at the chain of what people were saying and how many people liked or supported Amy Schumacher and how many people did not like the fact that it was not funny, it was not a joke anymore. And people could not joke and degrade people anymore. And it's quite interesting to see how we become victim to that when we very innocently like a comment. We need to watch out. We need to be mindful of ourselves when we do this. Now, people often hide, and one of the latest forms of bullying is the phony accounts, these fake accounts. And people often hide behind these accounts to attack their victims. So bullies often do that right now, and this is increasing. Sometimes the bullies personally know their target, and they're waiting for someone to say something about the target before they almost copy or share that kind of social media message. Many cyberbullies have personal challenges happening in their lives, hence their desire to target other people as they conceal their own identities. This is not a justification, but this is also a form of a psychological or a cause for psychological distress. If someone is actually going through a specific challenge and yet projects that kind of frustration on someone else and causes demise to someone else, that is indication of a deeper challenge. Let's look at the next reason. Sadism. And I loved this picture. And this picture also scared me, but it was very, very intentional. So I'm sorry for those who were just like shocked by it. So sometimes there is a deeper pathological reason behind this drive of bullying. And we often determine this as sociopathic behavior. There are certain people who purely enjoy hurting another person. There are certain people who purely enjoy actually causing pain or harm to another person, and in a result get pleasure from that. So abusive relationships and criminals who go on to target individuals who fit a certain mold fall under this category. When sadism is a strong factor behind a bully's actions, they are more likely to be far more dangerous than bullies driven by all the other factors or reasons that we've discussed previously. So sadism is actually quite an important reason It's quite a disturbing reason, and it's a reason why we need to call out the bullies when we notice this kind of behavior. There's no reason for revenge. There's no reason for power. You're not a perceived threat. This is not a cyberbullying or anything like that. But something is going on with this individual, and the individual thrives when they are able to take down another individual. That sadistic behavior tells us that this kind of behavior needs to be stopped before it continues into criminal activity. Let's move on. So knowing what we know about bullies, knowing what the possible reasons may be, provides for an opportunity to prevent or address this kind of behavior head on. Now, one of the most interesting reasons for bullies, and one of the reasons why they bully, is perhaps unresolved trauma. Many bullies have unresolved trauma from their past, be it in childhood or adolescence or whatever stage they've experienced being bullied at. This unresolved trauma can no longer be contained, and it manifests, if it is not addressed earlier, it manifests quite negatively. And as it manifests, an unknown victim becomes that kind of object of their way of actually, can we say, addressing their trauma quite negatively. Bullying others is one of the most negative symptoms in which unresolved traumas can manifest. And it's actually quite disturbing. Once again, this is not justifying bullies, but actually putting an understanding of the possible reasons of why a bully might actually engage in activity that causes such harm and negative behavior. Let's move on and see what we can do about this. So why is it important to stop bullies? So understanding their psychological factors helps us actually create systems and systems of support and systems of actually addressing or helping the victim and also the perceived bully. Promoting mental health and anti-bullying policies is also an important way of putting an end to bullying in the workplace, wherever you are. This can help survivors, bystanders, or bullies and potential bullies of any age alike. So there has to be a pure policy advocacy of no bullying. And when we say no bullying, specifically in schools, this applies to bullying in the workplace as well. So the invitation is, if we have these anti-bullying policies of posters in the school, in the halls, or wherever you are, why aren't we also duplicating or echoing that kind of message in the staff room? Staff need to be aware that bullying can permeate to adults, and we often need to have these conversations about workplace bullying. Workplaces can safeguard their employees in this way. Now, mental health, and according to Marshall in 2023, he mentioned that mental health can provide, or understanding workplace or safeguarding their employees can provide a pleasant and productive atmosphere for all by developing rules and procedures that condemn bullying, offering assistance, options, and encouraging open communication. We need staff members and we need our colleagues to be very aware of what is bullying in the workplace. And this needs to be addressed quite purposefully. This is not a topic that we need to tread on very carefully because it also involves adults, specifically for my audience today, teachers. And if your mental health is affected, if your mental health is definitely being trampled on or disregarded, it impacts on your purpose, which is to engage with younger minds and to motivate others. And we know that very famous saying, you cannot pour from an empty cup. Check in with yourselves. Address the issue of bullying in a workplace. And therefore and thereafter, can you only feel fulfilled to continue in your purpose of being an educator? Setting boundaries is step one of actually addressing bullying. Boundaries can let others know what type of behavior you're willing to accept. So when the initial bullying starts, it is important for you to vocalize that is actually unacceptable. It is difficult for some of us who feel that we cannot verbalize, but actually stop laughing and saying, not funny, and walking away is actually effective. There's also a 4-letter word that is extremely effective to stop a bully or perceived bully. And what's quite interesting is this 4-letter word comes from a childhood word, which each one of us is familiar with. And the word is ouch. Ouch creates a boundary for anybody that has caused some harm or destruction to another individual. Saying the word ouch when you're unable to verbalize that's not okay actually helps one to understand your boundaries. Let's look at the next step that you may be able to take. Confronting the behavior. This may not be easy for some, and this may actually be a time where we all have our limits and you need to confront the bully. So once you establish a boundary, follow through with the consequence is actually very important. If you say ouch and walk away, the next time you do see the person, we cannot continue as normal. We cannot laugh about the incident, but just say, that was actually quite hurtful. Follow through with your consequences. Remain professional and avoid retaliation. So we're not talking about engaging in a fight here. We're talking about being responsive. We're not talking about being reactive. Now, here's the difference. Pausing, understand you can do something about it and set that boundary. If you have created a boundary by someone to say, that's actually unacceptable, I don't like that, that makes me feel uncomfortable. And if the person says it again, actually calling them on it is extremely important to say, we've discussed this before. You know how I speak about this. Why are you repeating this behavior? Please use I statements to assertively vocalize your experience of concerns. Don't say you did this and you did that. What really helps is, I felt really hurt. I felt targeted with that comment. So use I statements. Follow up with your consequences is really, really important in confronting behavior. Let's look at the next one. Speak up. Really, really harder said than done. But if you've tried resolving the bullying on your own without success, it is time to involve your employer, to involve your line manager, or if it is your line manager, to involve HR, to involve somebody else who will listen, someone who is responsible enough to help you do something about it ethically. Check with your workplace employee handbook to learn more about what steps you need to take to file a complaint. Each workplace has different policies, so please look into your policy. And if there is none, then there is actually a reason for you to create this conversation to start up a policy. Self-care. So it is so important, like I said, that you cannot pour from an empty cup. You need to attend to yourself from the effects of a toxic work environment due to bullying. Seek out support. Social support in case of calling out various numbers that can actually help you, or call centers, or someone you truly trust. And when I say someone you trust to help you do something about this ethically. Practice relaxation techniques for stress. Feeling or being a victim of bullying can be extremely stressful. It can be extremely hurtful as well. So check in with yourself and notice when you are feeling anxious in a workplace. Consider talking to a mental health professional if this continues to take place. And if you are experiencing symptoms of depression, anxiety, or distress, it is time to speak up, to reach out and get that help. So my last slide, thrive where you vibe. The ultimate goal for us to thrive where we find our purpose is to vibe with our employees, to vibe with our colleagues, to vibe with our managers and HODs. It does seem very idealistic, but there are moments and opportunities where this can be celebrated. Therefore, my pledge to you, my invitation is call out. Call it out when you have been bullied. Call out when you know something is actually going on and something is wrong. Call out the fact that you may be a victim of bullying. And let's change this narrative. And if you are someone who has felt guilty during this presentation to you of being a bully, it is time to seek help too. You are not alone. Help is available, and it's time to change that narrative of hurt and pain where we should be thriving. Thank you so much for listening and for actually investing in this opportunity, for being part of this presentation that is really helpful. I'm now going to leave you with Janine Kendall and Alicia Coertze, who's going to speak about self-care and self-love, which is so vitally important today. Over to you, Janine and Alicia.
Thank you so much, Dr. Laila, for this insightful session this morning. And I'm happy to see that you ended off with self-care, really leading us into what we will be speaking about today. So I'm just going to quickly introduce myself. My name is Alicia, and my colleague is Janine Kendall. And today we will really be talking about self-care and self-love, and hopefully really bringing about a different perspective to this. I think we've all heard a lot about self-care and self-love, and we're really hoping that today you will take something away from this, even if it's just a little bit of a perspective change, a reminder, something that you can use today to really go and love yourself and take care of yourself. If today you enjoyed what we are speaking about, which is really a bit of a different take, then we want to encourage you to also go and look at our social media. We do host other workshops around this topic where we will dive in deeper. Today, we only have a short amount of time, and yeah, we are excited to share this. So thank you so much, SACAP, for this opportunity. So as teachers, you play such an extraordinary role in shaping the mind and the future of the next generation. You are not just a teacher, you are sometimes a mentor, you are sometimes a counselor, you are sometimes a parent, a guide, a caregiver, and sometimes a conflict manager, to just name a few. You are always there for others, and that is what your occupation often requires of you. But in between all these different roles, you are still trying to carry out your teaching duties. You've got administrative duties. You need to manage your classroom. You still have to go and coach that netball game or attend the athletics in the afternoons. You are trying to deal with parents. You are trying to deal with crises on a daily basis. And at the same time, you are trying to manage your everyday life. And if you've got children, you've got to manage your children. So there's so much on your plate as a teacher, as an educator, as a principal. And this can be quite strenuous. So the demands of this amazing profession is quite overwhelming. And it is so easy for teachers to put themselves second and to really neglect themselves. Self-care is not often a priority for teachers, and that is completely understandable. Although you only work maybe from 8 to 2, there's so many extramural activities that you still have to do. There's marking of papers, and you always tend to take work home with you. So we are incredibly thankful for this incredible profession, and we really hope that we get to impart a little bit back into you. But unfortunately, teachers are prone to burnout, fatigue, neglect, and oftentimes we feel that we don't really know what to do with all of this workload or all of this that is expected of us. Now, I want to say, if you resonated with anything that I said today, I would like for you in the chat section to just comment a yes for me so that I can just see whether you do resonate with this. I think in any helping profession, especially as teachers, it's really so easy, like I say, to put yourself second. And I'm pretty sure a lot of us can really resonate with this. I'm seeing an overwhelming amount of yeses, and this is truly, you are on the right place. And I'm hoping that this section that we will speak about will really help you to manage exactly that. Thank you so much for all of the yeses. So, you know, sometimes when we look at self-care, there's quite a few myths and things about self-care that makes us feel like we can't take care of ourselves. We might feel that self-care is expensive. Oftentimes we go into social media and we see colleagues on island holidays or long spa days, and we really feel like we don't have the means to actually go to those things. And so we tend up to neglect our self-care because we feel like it's inaccessible. Sometimes we might feel like self-care takes a lot of time and you don't really have a lot of time. We often think that you only need to take care of yourself when you deserve it, or only, you know, have self-care when you're at your last little strand of hope. And unfortunately, then it's a little bit too late. But we think we only need to take care of ourselves when we really desperately need to, or only when we deserve it. We might say something like, you know, if I only get to mark these 20 papers, then only can I take care of myself. And we oftentimes think that self-care is selfish. And we think that, you know, at a profession where so many people need us and so many people need us to show up, that it's quite selfish for us to say, hold on, I need a break, or hold on, I need to take some care of myself as well. I want to pose something that might be a little bit different, but self-care is only temporary often. And it only is an interim for when we are not feeling good, or when we feel like our cup is starting to empty out. And that's why sometimes you might feel like self-care is just not enough. You know, I spent the entire weekend taking care of myself. I spent the entire weekend, you know, really trying to relax. And Monday in the classroom, about midday, it feels like you need another weekend again because you are just tired from the start. And that is often because self-care is really only a temporary relief that we face. And sometimes it really just doesn't give us that, you know, self-care that we're really hoping to get from it. Now, it will not bring relief to our situations or discomforting choices that we need to make. Self-care, unfortunately, does not resolve our problems or situations at hand. It does not resolve our job satisfaction or our relationships. And oftentimes we want to put this plaster of self-care on any difficulty that we do face. And we are quite disappointed sometimes because even though you can, you know, lie in the bathtub with a glass of wine or go for a jog or read your favorite book, sometimes it's just not enough. And I think that's where we sometimes get stuck because we feel like we actually need more. We then end up not taking care of ourselves, and we really risk burnout, fatigue, and neglecting ourselves ultimately. So how do we find out what is this missing link or this missing element to self-care? I'm going to hand over to my colleague Janine, who is going to take us into this next section of really seeing why is it that we are often not satisfied enough with the self-care practices that we try to use. Thank you, Janine.
Thank you, Alicia, and thank you also for sharing your story with us and your valuable insights on self-care. The concept and practice of self-care has gained a lot of traction lately, and over the last few years, research in the area has increased, and the general public's access to social media has popularized the concept of self-care. And during this time, we've also witnessed a global pandemic and its ramifications. And this period was particularly challenging for teachers as they navigated the balance between personal well-being and their responsibilities. And as Alicia explained, self-care does not always leave us feeling better. In fact, it may have the opposite effect. We may feel guilty for taking time out for ourselves or for not being able to make time for ourselves. And either way, we are left feeling unfulfilled and just drained as before. So it is essential to understand that real self-care involves turning towards ourselves, focusing inwards and addressing our personal needs, which is beyond our roles as teachers. So I'm going to actually talk us through how we can do this. Remember maybe the last time that you felt really frustrated after a challenging classroom situation, or that you felt completely drained from paperwork. Those strong emotions could be a signal that some of your personal needs are not being met. Perhaps you need more rest, appreciation, or support. The magic ingredient or the missing link to effective self-care is that the practice should be linked to our needs. Now, I'm going to say that again because it is so important. The magic ingredient or the missing link to effective self-care is that the practice should be linked to our needs. And we can go on to the next slide. So this strong emotion that we feel is often ourselves telling ourselves that we have a need and that we should be turning towards ourselves in order to recognize the need. So on this slide, you can see a list of needs. We may have many needs, so some of these you can read through quickly. I'll give you a few seconds to do that. And some of these needs might even surprise you as being needs. Do any of these resonate with you? So have a quick look at those lists of needs. And if you would like to share, you can use the chat and you can write down a need from the list that maybe resonates most with you right now, in this moment as you're sitting there. Only if you want to share. So if you had to listen to your inner truth, what would it say? Maybe you have a need for learning or a need to be understood. And maybe that is why you've chosen to attend today's workshop. And in a way, attending today's talk may be a small first step to fulfilling these needs. And if you consider your role as a teacher, perhaps there's a need for acknowledgement, a need for growth, or a need for collaboration. And I can see so many of you added some of your needs in the chat. I can see beautiful needs there, need for support, a need for joy, a need for compassion and empathy. So when we're identifying these needs, it helps us to make choices that really resonate with our inner truth. And this is quite a different perspective, like Alicia mentioned. It's a different perspective to self-care, because self-care is just a practice. It's just something that we do to feel better in the moment. But when we are taking care of our needs and what it is that we really want, then we are moving more towards self-love. And we can move to the next slide. So once you understand what you need, you can find a way to meet that need, even if it is a very small first step. And the more that we turn towards ourselves, listen to ourselves, and meet our needs, the more resilience we can build to bounce back from adversities and also then to maintain our well-being. So fulfilling one's needs is the cornerstone of self-love. And I think the word self-love is quite powerful. It's much deeper than just saying, I need to take care of myself. Just imagine what even a 5-minute break during your busy day, where you consciously practice deep breathing, could do for your well-being. Or dedicating 1 day a week to completely disconnect from schoolwork, to indulge in a hobby or a passion. These small acts can significantly enhance your resilience and your sense of self-worth. On the next slide, I ask, why is this important for you as teachers? How does this foster resilience? Well, Alicia mentioned this as well as Dr. Laila, who said you face multiple challenges daily. You manage diverse classroom settings, and you also have a lot of administrative pressures. Resiliency aids in navigating these stresses with grace, so that you are better equipped to offer your best selves to your learners. And how do we enhance resiliency? Through self-love. We can set boundaries. Dr. Laila also spoke about this. We need to learn to say no when necessary. This can safeguard our well-being, and it also ensures that we give our best where it matters most. Saying no is an act of self-care. We can also self-reflect and be more mindful. Regularly checking in with yourself, using practices such as journaling or meditation to really understand and address your needs. Turning towards yourself more in responding to your needs in a gentle and accepting manner. We often speak very gently and kindly to friends, but not so much to ourselves. We can also do this by seeking support. Dr. Laila also mentioned this, engaging in a professional development process, joining teacher support groups, or speaking with a mentor. We really thrive when we connect. We also need to celebrate our achievements. Recognize and reward yourself for milestones, no matter how small. This really bolsters our self-worth and our motivation. On the next slide, you'll see a diagram, and you will see what happens when we engage in effective self-care and when we don't. Self-care and self-love fill our energy reservoir. When we fulfill our needs, we have a reserve of energy to draw from. The reservoir helps us bounce back quicker from stresses. The popular saying that you've heard today as well, you can't pour from an empty cup, is relevant here. By practicing self-love, you do not only build this reservoir for yourself, but you also model these healthy practices for your learners. And for a teacher, an empty cup doesn't mean just personal burnout. It can also influence your classroom dynamics, your learner outcomes, and the overall school culture. And by continuously replenishing your cup, you're ensuring that your learners receive the best of you. And in the quest to educate and nurture the next generation, teachers must also nurture themselves. Building resiliency through self-love not only fortifies your own well-being, but it also elevates the quality of education that you offer. And in closing, we would like to challenge you today to turn towards yourself and listen to your needs. Maybe just one need you have today, and see how that feels. I will now hand over to Dr. Lauren Martin.
Thank you so much. And hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for still being here. And I hope you have found as much value as I have in the first two presentations. So today I'm going to be posing a couple of bigger questions to you. Why aren't teachers speaking up in the work environment? What is it about the working environment that isn't allowing educators to have a voice? And why isn't change happening from within the system? My PhD focused on educator voice, and that when we want to find solutions to challenges raised in the teaching space, the experts to solve these challenges are often your educators. So today, we will briefly touch on the importance of psychologically safe environments and how this enables teams to have a voice, be more resilient, happier, and generally more successful. So as you look at the picture on the next slide, I want you to think about your current work environment or school team that you function in. How often do you talk about your mistakes or errors or things that you have got wrong? How often does the environment provide space for teachers and peers to learn from each other and learn from these challenges? How are the mistakes or failures dealt with in the environment? Research within Google called Project Aristotle found that better teams, higher performing teams, more successful teams, more resilient teams are teams who fail often, but also openly speak about these failures so everyone can use these as learning opportunities. It isn't about getting it right the first time or sticking to what we know. It is about trial and error and learning through the process so we get better outcomes. Failure is an opportunity to learn, problem solve, and retry. When we approach failure in this manner, we build a resilient workforce. But as you see on the next slide, the truth is, in reality and within working environments, this isn't really how failure is handled. Environments aren't psychologically safe, where we can talk about our weaknesses or our difficulties or our failures. For example, you're in a meeting and you have a question, but you look around and no one else is asking that question. So maybe you think, well, maybe I should actually know that answer. So instead of asking that question, I'll just keep it to myself and I'll try and figure it out later. And so what we're seeing is that people are keeping quiet. Nobody wants to look ignorant or incompetent or intrusive or negative. And so we perpetuate an environment where people don't ask questions, where we don't admit our weaknesses or our shortcomings. We don't offer alternative ideas. We don't criticize or offer feedback on the status quo to do things differently. What we are doing is self-protecting. We are responding from a space of fear, and so we rather keep quiet. And so we don't create spaces for educator voice within the environment. On the next slide, work environments, and particularly school environments, are often characterized as psychologically unsafe environments, where there isn't room for mistakes or failures. And so individuals aren't sharing this, and there isn't an opportunity for the team to be learning through failures or mistakes. When the work environment is like this, it's no surprise why teachers or employees are silent. The environment isn't psychologically safe, and therefore your voice is not being heard. And what you'll see in the next picture is that the consequence of silence is that your teachers are the most untapped resources. People need to stop telling teachers how they should do their jobs, or how to do things differently, or how to solve the problems that they're experiencing. What we're needing to do is rather create safe spaces where they can tell you what the challenge is and what the solutions are. There is extensive ideas, creativity, resources, experiences within our teaching body. And if we aren't finding ways to tap into this, the environment remains the same. The solution and the problem solving should happen within the school system, not from the outside. On the next slide, we talk about, well, why is that important? When we have psychologically safe environments to work in, firstly, teams are learning and problem solving together. Secondly, teams aren't responding from a place of fear. And thirdly, teams are creating change in that environment. So when we have psychologically safe environments, teams are more resilient and agile in the face of change and failure and discomfort. On the next slide, if we're talking about psychological safety being so important, well, what does that look like then in a school environment? Google's Project Aristotle was enough proof for what we all intrinsically know. That feeling safe to be yourself as part of a team, where you're able to contribute your ideas, admit mistakes, challenge others respectfully, and try without fear of failure, is one of the most powerful aspects of human performance. So as you look at the next picture, I want you to think to yourself, think of your current team that you function in. Is it a psychologically safe team or not? And then think about the school environment. Is that a psychologically safe environment or not? On the next slide, I just want to reiterate that this isn't just up to principals or heads of departments or leads in order to create these psychologically safe environments. Of course, they play a role. But the truth is, these leaders themselves may be feeling psychologically unsafe. And so we perpetuate the same type of environments. And so it's actually up to every single person within that environment to contribute to making a team feeling safe, or actually perpetuating whether that environment feels unsafe. Take a moment to think about yourself. Are you contributing to a safe environment, or do you perpetuate an unsafe one? And on the next slide, I'll make that a bit more practical. So what I mean by this is, are you being measured only by outputs and what you produce? And are you creating that same expectation for your team? Or is there space to think and problem solve and be creative while finding solutions? Or are you speaking up as a leader when you don't know something? If not, you perpetuate that your team shouldn't be vulnerable either. And maybe a last example would be, are you asking other people to input their ideas and to add to proposed solutions? Or do you perpetuate that people should just listen and follow? On the next slide, we talk about some very practical examples or tangible ways a school environment or teams within a school environment can set up structures that help create psychological safety. So I'm going to just name a couple, and you can think about whether or not your current school environment have sort of these things in place or not. Reward structures for new ideas and innovations. Policy that speaks into mental well-being. Professional development schedules. Anonymous surveys where individuals can give feedback. What about a mentor or a co-worker support scheme put in place? Or incentives to teams who model good well-being practices? Or supervision sessions as a safe space to discuss challenges? Or termly brainstorming and creativity sessions? Or termly spaces to talk about common challenges and collectively finding solutions? Does your school environment or your team within that environment have any of these structures in place? They may have other structures in place that support psychological safety. On the next slide, I want to bring this a little bit closer to home in terms of how we think about our students that we're teaching. Our students we teach are being modeled that failure is high risk with big consequences. There is fear in being wrong, not having the answer, looking intrusive, or being negative. We label outspoken students. We punish individuals who get things wrong. By the time we leave school, as young adults, we are self-protecting. And I guess as teachers, you have an opportunity to create a classroom environment and a school environment that fosters psychological safety, where graduates can move on to the next phase of their life, not unlearning to fear failure, but rather to embrace this. And in this way, we are fostering resilient students. So on my final slide, it's just a very practical example of how teachers can do this. The link is there, and it is a free resource. It's not my resource. But classroom contracting, where psychologically safe principles are utilized, is one way teachers can co-create classroom experiences that are safe. If all teachers are doing this, students have psychologically safe learning environments and they're building the necessary resiliency skills in class with you. It means that students don't necessarily need to attend additional workshops or additional support in how to foster resiliency, because they're learning that in class with you, because you've set up an environment that allows them to problem solve and be creative and fail. So in ending, is your school environment psychologically safe? Is your team psychologically safe? And are your classrooms set up to create psychological safety for your students? Thank you for your time. I'm going to hand back to Steph.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lauren, Dr. Laila, and Janine, as well as Alicia. I'm pretty sure everybody who has attended this call has taken away something very valuable today. Dr. Laila, I am aware that you have answered one of these questions, but I think if you could maybe publicly answer for anybody who maybe didn't see the answer. So the question is, what if HR is the bully or the one causing harm?
So thank you for that question. And it was quite an interesting but alarming question at the same time. So my guidance to you is to still speak up. So speak up to either an HOD, a head, a manager, the school principal, or your colleagues. This is a serious offense. And this is also unethical in terms of whatever the scope that the HR representative is practicing in. The idea is do not remain silent. We have to do something about this in order to change the narrative. So if you feel HR is not representing you or is in fact the actual bully, the onus is to keep going, keep speaking to either person in authority to make that change happen. Possibilities are that you may not be the only person experiencing this kind of reaction or behavior.
But Dr. Laila, just another question for you. Students bullying teachers is the most common type of bullying worldwide, especially when students target either teachers who are strict or teachers who are very new and young. What advice would you give to such teachers to cope, and how must they handle these students? I would just like to add that we do have another educator who's also asked, how do I react when the pupils are the bullies towards teachers? So if you can maybe just answer both of them, please.
Sure. So that is quite a serious issue when students are targeting teachers as bullying. This is not just bullying, but this is a massive disciplinary matter. This is not even a matter that warrants mediation, but it actually warrants you to actually report this discipline or this misdemeanor. Schools have strict policy about student behavior, and part of student behavior and an anti-bullying policy is really important in this regard. If you feel a victim of a student intimidating you or being offensive towards you, you have the absolute right to actually report the student to someone in your disciplinary role, in a pastoral role, whoever is involved in disciplinary matters, to bring it to their attention immediately. Students bullying teachers is unacceptable. Now that warrants immediate disciplinary action, whether it is calling in the students' parents and making them aware of what is going on. Young teachers sometimes it can be very overwhelming being in a schooling environment for the first time as well. But also this needs to be a language or communication that we need to speak as a group. If a school has a firm anti-bullying policy, between students, between teachers, amongst teachers, then you're speaking in one voice. But in no way are students allowed to bully, intimidate, or to be aggressive in any manner, verbally, emotionally, or physically towards a teacher. That is warranted as a disciplinary issue.
Thank you so much, Dr. Laila. I think we do have another question that also relates to students bullying teachers. But we've got, as an educator, how can you manage students that are critical on you as an educator? So for context, providing constructive feedback, yet they only focus on getting high marks and not focusing on how to improve, even though these discussions take place often.
So I think that's quite a lovely and interesting question. And I think right now we're looking at students, I'm not sure if they're being critical on you, but it almost sounds as if they're extremely critical on themselves, especially if they're just focusing on getting higher marks and not improving. It seems like there is, perhaps a possibility of a deeper challenge for the student. The idea for teachers addressing students as well is knowing the role that you play. And the role that you play as an educator is someone that often offers compassion, direction, and like we heard Dr. Martin say, models that behavior. So in that kind of instance, it's interesting to note that the student is critical on your teaching methods. But a deeper question is the student okay? Are you okay? What is good enough for you? And actually almost flipping that question around to reflect, what do you need to come through to actually achieving your goal, or an actual believable goal, achievable goal? And what do you need to do to come through? Because as a teacher, you have done your job in terms of educating a student. What do they need further to achieve their goals? Not from you, but what do they need to do? So a nice idea is to offer that kind of compassion towards them. Notice that it may not be a criticism to you, but almost criticism to themselves to actually get, better marks. Is there pressure? Is there peer pressure? Where's it coming from? I would honestly start with a very basic question of, are you okay? What do you need to actually come to this mark? What do you require to come to this? Because I'm doing A, B, or C. What is it that you can do? And it's almost flipping responsibility back to the student as well, and actually putting that spotlight away from you as a criticism and letting them reflect, giving them an opportunity just to check in.
Thanks so much, Dr. Laila. I would like to open to the rest of the panel if you'd like to also maybe share your experience or insight into these questions.
Thanks. Maybe I can just add to that. I thought it was an interesting question, and it's probably because it's something that comes up quite often. It's not just within a primary school or high school, but in higher education, that is also a very similar theme that comes up around our educational system is geared around grades so that you can progress to the next stage. And so students aren't necessarily focused on the learning journey, but the output of that. And it places a great deal of pressure on educators and the system. And in that process, I feel educators can often feel bullied into giving higher grades because there is so much pressure around students complaining about that. And so maybe just two practical things from my side is I often think there is a need to manage expectations. And yes, we can have those conversations with students, but often that pressure comes from parents who don't really understand, or they went through the schooling system and that was the way they saw education. And so the pressure is coming from there. And so my sense is that we should be managing expectations from students, but also their parents and guardians. And ultimately, the school environment should have a shared understanding of what this means and what their philosophy is around this, so that it doesn't feel like it's against the teacher needing to justify marks, but it is the school system's stance on what learning is about and where does grades fall within that. And I guess creating psychologically safe classroom environments where you set up a contract in the beginning. I think one of the important things we should be doing is talking about this topic with students. Why is there that pressure? Where does that come from? And giving space for students to talk about that in a safe space and to be vulnerable about it. We might be able to identify that there are a couple of reasons why that's coming up. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Lauren. Alicia and Janine, would you also like to speak into this answer or maybe continue?
I could possibly give a comment on that. I was also an educator for a little while, and I also see that there was a question of someone training young educators. In my first year, of being an educator in a high school was really tough, because I did find a lot of students bullying you with regards to marks or not being happy with some of the things. And a valuable lesson that I learned was to really externalize those problems and not to have it be a reflection on yourself. So when there is a problem at hand and the student does come and they try to bulldoze over your boundary, to say that I understand that this is difficult for you, but the rule says ABC, or unfortunately I can't remark your paper. That is the rule that the school has posed, but I do understand your frustration and I'm sorry that you're feeling that way. So to not really take those bullying things that the students do say onto yourself, exactly like Dr. Lawrence said, oftentimes all of these expectations and pressure as well, and sometimes that bully is directly onto you as a person. But if you could just externalize that and not take it personally, it really does help for yourself to just put that boundary and protect yourself as a teacher as well.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Dr. Lauren, we do have a question for you. How can the forming of cliques be dealt with? It is very negative towards the unity of a team.
Thanks for that. Sure, I was taking some time to just think about this question, because in reality, people do gravitate towards each other. We don't all have to like each other and want to be with each other all the time. And so I think having smaller groups or friendships within a larger system is normal. I think it can turn quite toxic if the cliques are creating a negative, negativity within that environment or that system. And I am assuming that is what this question is geared towards. There are cliques within an environment and it's negative. It doesn't create unity within that space. For me, it would be a symptom of a psychologically unsafe environment where people don't feel that they can voice perhaps what they're feeling, and so they gravitate towards each other and they're speaking about it. They're not constructively speaking about it, and they're not necessarily changing that environment, but it speaks into a larger issue for me. And so how do you deal with it? I guess my question back would be, are you creating a psychologically safe space for other team members? Can people raise these things? Can we be talking about these things in a safe space? And if not, I'm not surprised that we have cliques within an environment. And so if this is an experience, I would encourage you to reach out to perhaps a lead or an HOD to talk about how do you as a team create a space where people are able to voice what's going on. And in that way, it's safer, and cliques and negativity doesn't necessarily spread. I hope that helps.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lauren. Hey, Janine and Alicia, I do have a question for you, and I just want to pull up the slide again. So I think, the practical tips that have been offered here today has definitely been well received, as we see in some of the comments that we've received so far. But maybe if you could speak into one or two of these needs, then maybe, and maybe just offer some practical tools or tips as to how we can meet those needs, or how educators and teachers can meet those needs. So maybe if there's the need for, someone said joy and humor, how do they go about meeting those needs, or connection, or support and understanding? If we can maybe just touch in onto maybe 3 of them, because I see we are running out of time, please.
Thank you so much. And I think that's such an important question. And I might just disappoint you, because actually there isn't an answer. The answer really is to ask yourself, if I'm listening to myself truly, what would be the first step that I can take to start fulfilling this need? So maybe that is something that you want to do. Maybe that's something that you don't want to do or want to do less of. So it's really asking yourself, what would I do now for me so that I can feel more joy, for example, or feel more safety, or feel that I'm learning more. And it really is about becoming more attuned to yourself and listening to that answer. I think sometimes we have become so used to the outside noise, what people want us to do, what we need to do as part of a specific role, and that we don't really listen to ourselves. And actually, we do know the answer. It's just taking that moment to really turn towards your inner truth and listen to what it is that you want to do. And it is not these, self-care practices that we see all over social media. Some of them might work if it is directly related to your need. So if you have a need for beauty, and part of that means taking a stroll outside in the garden, surrounding yourself by beautiful nature and having your cup of tea there, that might fulfill that need more than having a long, relaxing bath with a glass of wine. So I think that's what we're trying to get across today, is that difference between fulfilling the need versus a list of self-care practices that we can just pick and choose from, and then we're hoping that we will feel better. So I hope I'm answering you, but it's actually that question that you need to ask yourself: what would I do now for me, for myself, so that I can feel more? And then you insert your need in there.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Janine. And I think definitely it is a practical question that I think everybody every attendee can ask themselves. So we have run out of time for this live Q&A session. But like I said, I am aware that our attendees have taken a lot from this. They are very grateful for the practical tips and the tools that have been given. Just a reminder that this recorded session will be available on our YouTube channel. It will also be shared on some of our other social media channels. And if you'd like to stay in contact with us about any updated programs, new launches, or just any other valuable free webinars that we host, please do follow us on social media. Lastly, I'd like to thank our panel once again for giving up your Saturday morning and providing these insightful tools and tips for educators and teachers who are shaping our future, as well as to all the educators and teachers who did join this morning for spending time with us, engaging with us, and obviously doing your bit to do better for the future. Thank you once again, everyone. Have a lovely day further and a great weekend. Take care.